Hello everyone, Matt from Model Minutes here and welcome back to the workbench for another unboxing. This week I'm taking a look at the vintage Spitfire Mk.1 in 1/72nd scale from Hasegawa. So join me as I take a look inside the box and see what this old kit was like. So starting off on the front of the box, you can see that we've got a rather striking image of the Spitfire in combat with an FW190. Not entirely sure the F190 was in use during the Battle of Britain, so can't really say that this was an accurate depiction. Nonetheless, it's quite an attractive image and it makes you want to buy the model. At least that's partly what caught my eye in the first place. Up here we've got a copyright date of 1987, so this kit is older than me. Over here we've got a price tag, but that was the price that I think was probably on the kit when it was new, or some years ago, because that's not what I paid for it. On this edge here we've got an image of a paint scheme which is included, which is an older or an earlier Mk.1 Spitfire. And then turning over to the longer edge, we've got some other images of other kits which were in the range. The short edges feature the same box artwork as on the front. And I'm pretty sure that A11 is the item code for this kit. So let's take a look inside the box. And I did check this in the shop before I bought it. It is second hand, but I'm led to believe that it is completely intact. So let's look at the instructions first. So the first sheet that I'm met with is a sort of generic information sheet with a few tips and hints on how to do your transfers, for example. And then flipping over, we've got some more sort of warnings and things down the bottom. The other piece of paper that we had in our kit was the actual instructions themselves. So this is pretty much just sort of a long fold out piece of paper. So at the top, we've got the image of the kit as built, all in black and white. Then we've got some history and some specifications of the actual Spitfire. And then a little bit further down, we've got the two paint schemes which are included. Printed in black and white, which was the style at the time. Personally, I prefer color, but this is a 1987 kit, so I can't really complain about that. The first one is an early Mk.1 Spitfire with the two-blade wooden propeller and sort of level canopy, whereas the second one is a Spitfire with three-bladed prop and the bubble canopy, or the sort of ballooned canopy. Coming down to the bottom of the page, we've got the upper and lower surfaces of both paint schemes and a little bit of text here about how to actually paint it. It gives you some more sort of notes regarding the paint scheme that's depicted here. I do think that the early Spitfire, it says it had white and black sort of alternated, but I've done a little bit of research and seen other people's builds and they've gone for sort of silver. They might have been sort of unpainted aluminium, so might have to double check that one. If you know, let me know in the comments. So flipping over to the other side, we've got our step-by-step instructions. On the right hand side here, we've got some sort of helpful information about assembling different things. So for example, painting the figure, sorting out your instrument panel, doing the landing gear, and highlighting here that we've got the different choice of props and canopies depending on which aircraft we do. And then we've also got sort of, it's like a part name call out rather than a sprue map, so it tells you what each part is. And a little bit here about antenna wire. It says use hair for the antenna wire, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use something else. So our first steps then, we are installing our pilot and cockpit parts together. Then we assemble our landing gear. I probably won't do it in this order. I'll probably do it in my own order depending on how I want to paint it. Then moving on down, we join our fuselage halves together and sandwich our cockpit and control panel in it. Then we add our wings and tail surfaces. Then the propeller, engine, exhausts and canopies, depending on which version you want to do. And then pretty much that's it. Add the landing gear and you are done. Not complicated and not too difficult to follow the instructions either. So let's take a look at the transfers. As you can see, my transfers have seen better days. The paper is a little bit wrinkled and they've yellowed, but over the last 30 odd years, that is sort of to be expected. I'll probably put these in my UV light box that I made for 3D printing to see if I can get rid of that yellowing so I can still use these. Looking at them though, I don't see any tears and I anticipate that they will still be usable, because I've had older transfers in the past where they've literally just disintegrated the second they touch water. So I'll probably scan these into the computer so I've got a copy before I begin building this, just to be sure, just in case, and then I will use them. I'll use these ones. I'll try and use the original ones as best as I can. We can see here we've got the different registration codes for the aircraft, and we've got the different roundels as well, depending on which version you're going to do, because the earlier Mark 1 had smaller ones than the later version. And then we've got some other sort of stencil bits here, but these are not printed particularly well, as was probably given the technology of the time, so they're sort of just representations rather than actual legible text. On the back there just tells us it's for the Spitfire Mark 1. And then finally, in a plastic bag, we have all of the parts. Like I said, this was a second-hand kit when I saw it in the shop, so I did check it before I bought it, and it does look to be complete. So we've got 2 grey plastic sprues and 1 clear one. Let's take a look at the clear one first. So this one features the 2 different canopies for the 2 different variants of the Spitfire Mark 1. We've got the sort of flat top and then the sort of bubbled one. The panel lines, or the frame lines on here, are incredibly shallow. They're barely a representation. So a bit of masking will be required to get those done quite nicely. There is a bit of flash as well on the back of each of these canopies, which will need cleaning up. Not terrible in the sense that there's no blemishes and the moulding seems to be quite clear. This one over here does have a little blemish down the bottom, but generally pretty good. Moving on to the grey sprues then, on this one we've got our upper and lower wing surfaces. You can see that there is some flash on this, and looking at the detail, it's quite a simple kit. A lot of things are already moulded on, like the air intakes. The detail is raised. It's all raised panel lines. There is some recessed stuff, but it's mostly of the raised variety, as was the style at the time. Moving over to the right hand side, we've got our engine exhausts, landing gear legs, and our tail surfaces. There are a few little ejector pin marks by the looks of it in a few places, which if you're really fussed about them you could clean up, but generally not too bad. The plastic doesn't feel greasy at all. It feels quite clean, so I wonder if the previous owner washed this at some point in its history. And the plastic feels quite hard and a little bit brittle, so I will have to be careful with that when I come to use this. The final sprue then, this features our fuselage halves, which again has raised detail. It's quite sort of softly moulded. It's not the best looking stuff in the world, but it's okay. Over on this side we've got our cockpit bulkhead, our pilot, who actually looks all right. Bit of flash, but he's usable. We've got our 2-bladed prop. Some of the smaller details, which we'll have to be careful with. The landing gear covers seem a bit small compared to other kits of the Spitfire that I've built. They might be slightly out of scale. Maybe a little bit of inaccuracy in the design process, but I'll use them because I've got them. And then we move on to our 3-bladed prop, the inside of the cockpit, and our 2 different prop choices, or spinner choices, depending on which prop we're going to use, along with the wheels there. Generally not badly moulded. No internal detail on here, which is a shame, but it was a product of the time. Like I said, this is over 30 years old, so you can't really complain. And that is pretty much that. So let's recap. We've got 2 grey sprues of fairly decently moulded parts. We've got 1 clear sprue, which features 2 different canopy options. A set of transfers, which at the time were probably really good. They do need a little bit of work now to bring them back up to a usable standard, but hopefully they go onto the model okay. A generic information sheet, and an instruction sheet which should be fairly easy to follow. And there we have it. That's a look inside of the vintage 1987 Spitfire Mark 1 from Hasegawa. Like I said earlier, this was a second-hand kit, and the price up there was the price that was on the kit at some point when it was bought, probably the first time. I actually paid £3.50 for this because the guy was like, yeah, do you know what, second-hand. He saw that at the top there and went, do you know what, he did say £5, and we sort of haggled down to £3.50, so not bad. That's not a bad price for a kit of this vintage. especially as it was probably never going to get built. Like I said when I first showed this in the other sort of stash video that I made, the guy who originally owned this, he ran out of space, had to move house, and then had to sell his excess. So hopefully I'll be able to give this model a home, and it will fulfill its destiny of being built after all this time. But yeah, so 1987 vintage kit, but it's actually a 1975 tooling. So even by, this point, it was over 10 years old. And interestingly, this kit has still been sort of in production even up until the last 4 or 5 years. The last time this was seen was in a sort of box, a boxing with other aircraft, I believe a sort of Dunkirk limited edition run where it was featured with a 109 and a Heinkel. So if I had that version from, I think that was 2018, I'd be saying that this is not a good kit because obviously it's so old. But for a 1987 kit, I'm actually pleasantly surprised. If I had this back when I was a child, I probably would be very, very happy with it. But anyways, let me know down in the comments, do you agree? Was this a fair unboxing of this vintage kit? As always, shout out to my channel members and patrons for the extra support they give the channel. Take a look in the description box to find out more. Whilst you're underneath the video, please leave a like and subscribe so that you never miss a modelling upload. Finally, the last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll see you on the workbench again next time.